Welcome back to the Messy City Podcast. I've got our returning champions from 2023 here, Jason Carter Solomon, Shamari Benton. How's it going, fellas?
I'm good, brother. I'm the Kendrick Lamar in this.
Oh, am I going to be Drake? Oh, let's do it. Let's do it, bro. First of all, you just don't know what you just started. I did a kettlebell workout last night, and I was like, okay. I mean, I don't want to show my age, but I was like, what is this beef all about, right? And I've tried to listen to the new Drake one with where he AIs Tupac and Snoop in it, and I'm like, okay, what's going on here? So I had to go back, and I listened to it from the beginning. There's a playlist on Spotify, and while I was working out, I heard it all, and there were some bars.
Yeah.
Oh man,
you can go down a serious rabbit hole.
There was some heat.
So, is Tupac still alive? What's your thoughts?
Oh, God.
Okay. You're not saying that.
No, Jamie and I, we were literally just talking about this the other day.
Do you think the world we live in now, with all the cell phones and public cameras, and you think someone of that magnitude could hide out? Like, is there some?
Yeah, there's no way. There's no way.
There's no place on the planet.
As much as I would love it to be true.
Yeah.
I mean, taken down way too early. You got to remember, Tupac was what, 26?
He was very young
when he died. Yeah. And think about the volume of material he put out, and then also think about the interviews and the thing that he said. Now, some of it, he was a young kid. You got to remember, some of the stuff he's saying, he's a young kid. Right. Think about you at 24 saying some things, right? It's like, you're going to say some nonsense, right? I mean, of course.
Yeah.
So he was full of piss and vinegar, so to speak, and he was just talking. But some of the stuff he says, I mean, it's legendary. I mean, it carries a legacy forward. There's a reason why he's so popular.
That's right.
Yeah.
But no, the world we live in today, I don't see how someone, I suppose you can have plastic surgery and change your whole look. I suppose that's possible.
Kind of like Colonia Dignidad and the Nazis back, like
what
after
happened?
World War II. Oh, you don't know this story? Okay, so they're gonna go down a rabbit hole. This is starting off great. Okay, so
sorry, folks. This has nothing to do.
We're a little off topic.
City planning or development.
It's all good.
So back in the after World War II, a lot of Nazis escaped to South America, to Argentina. And there's a town there called Colonia Dignidad, and it is a Nazi German enclave. Like, there are still people like doing Nazi salutes, or at least they have pictures of their grandparents in Nazi regalia on their walls, and they have German Fest and Oktoberfest, and it is steeped in that history because so many Nazis fled there for protection. And there was a great movie back in the 80s, but I'm not going to get into that, where like people got plastic surgery and went there and like clandestinely hid out and led ordinary lives. Right. So anyways, that's a whole other side. No, I do not think Tupac is alive.
All right.
I wish he was, but I don't think he got plastic surgery.
All right. So
get us back here.
We put that to bed.
We figured it out. Heard it here first on the Messy City Podcast.
That's right. We're breaking news.
Breaking news. We put this
Tupac
to bed.
is dead.
Just shows how well versed we all are.
We will definitely be on 60 Minutes.
Yeah. So Jamie was just telling me, I didn't know this, that apparently he read for the role on Star Wars that Samuel L. Jackson played.
Tupac did?
Get out.
Yeah.
Well, he
was originally supposed to be the guy.
He went to a performing art. He's been in a lot of movies. He was in a lot of movies, I should say. And his roles, my favorite role he did was Bishop and Juice. But he played a lot of roles in movies that were 180 from his actual, at least how he presented himself in quote unquote real life.
Yeah.
He went to acting. He went to a performing arts high school with Jada Pinkett.
That's right.
Really?
That's their background. Yes.
Oh, right.
So they knew each other since high school. Huh. So he had a performing arts background. He had an acting background. So that was not a stretch of his skill set.
There's videos of him performing Shakespeare.
That's right.
Online.
All right.
People look at the end of his music career and kind of like focus on the, for lack of a better term, the
persona
thug,
that he built.
the thug, like tough guy aspect. But if you look at his whole music collection from beginning to end, you look at his acting career, you listen to his interviews, as JCS had referenced, some of his interviews in magazines, Vibe, etc. he was a fascinating cat, like a
Yeah.
very well-rounded dude.
All right.
Anyway.
All right. Well, let's talk some development and planning stuff. And
Let's do it.
we got a couple of topics to dive into. So there was one that we were texting about earlier, but I want to talk. It's kind of related to this, but I want to talk about this. I've got no data to share on this, and maybe one of you has better data. But obviously, there's been a lot of discussion about commercial real estate nationwide and the troubles that are happening, especially related to the office market. My one person observation driving around town in my part of the city is, my God, it seems like there's a lot of commercial real estate vacancy right now. Retail, office, industrial. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's just stuff that I'm seeing. I don't know if this is like a temporary thing. It's like a transition in the market or whatever. I know the office market nationally is in deep, deep trouble.
Yeah.
And locally, probably not as bad, but there probably are submarkets within Kansas City that are not good. So, I mean, I know Jason, like on the lending side, you deal with this a lot. Shamari on the development side and other things that you see and do. I'm just curious, like, what are you seeing? I mean, not to start the whole show with like a bummer discussion, but I'm
often the wet blanket, unfortunately, and I hate to be that. But yeah, no, I get where you're going.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's interesting. I will tell you, velocity is certainly down from a transaction standpoint year over year. That's a symptom of monetary policy, right? But there's also inflationary pressures that have to come to bear in that. You know, people had a much more heightened sense of, okay, well, you know, most things you throw against the wall will stick, and there's a deal almost around every corner. That's simply not the case today. I've often said, you know, right now, commercial real estate returns, meaning cap rates overall, are not trading at the premiums that they should comparative to monetary policy. The risk return spreads should be much higher. What I mean by that is this. You still have triple net investments and retail investments, office to a far less degree, but industrial still trading in 6s to 7s in tertiary markets, 5s in some primary markets. Some of that's driven by 1031 capital exchanging. And so there's a desperate pressure to go deploy that capital once you have it to, you know, push or kick the tax can down the road. But they are accepting lower threshold returns than what monetary policy is. So if 5-year treasury is at 4.6, you throw a spread on that, acceptable, let's say it's 250 to 300 on average, you're in the high 6s, low 7% range on the money you borrow on a leverage basis. You cannot sustain negative leverage past the point when an investment starts to need some CapEx, some tenant turnover, and ultimately like loan maturity incidences. Because what happens is the loan does not cash flow once the interest rate rises, and so you have to remargin the asset. But there are different motivations where people are still seeking low returns or accepting low returns. It should be trading at much higher. I think what's happening, though, is that you have a class of people who still consider themselves capital allocators, where they're trying to play the spread instead of the entrepreneurial management acuity that real estate really takes. And what real estate comes down to is not truly always a passive investment. It is much more of a, hey, it's with any business. How do I have a product, space, square footage. How do I go and compete within the market in order to attract the pool of demand to my supply over the next guy? You have to have a compelling business case for that. Where people are going to win are those people that can do that. The people that are losing and finding deals falling apart, where they come to me and say, hey, I got a seller that wants to sell. I got a buyer wants to buy. Can you cut a loan? And they've already agreed on a price. And then I tell them, hey, that doesn't work. Well, I can't pay that much. I need you to lend me more money. Well, that's not how the math works. And so those deals fall apart. People that say, hey, I have the ability, the experience, and the secret sauce to curate a different experience with my product, the square footage, that leads me to believe I can still reach market premiums. I can mark to market on all of those things I just talked about, including construction costs. Those people will still get deals done. So what you're finding is people are starting to flake out, right? People are starting to get ushered out of our industry through attrition, because when money's cheap, everybody looks smart.
Mm-hmm.
When money is what it normally should be, especially given inflationary pressures, it takes much more management and entrepreneurial acuity than it does when we're just talking about what's the spread on the cap rate and then what's the reversion and IRR, and that's how I'm selling the equity and that's how I'm making my money. It's just no longer the case. And so what you see on the ground is you see users voting for a lot of different reasons, which I'll stop talking and I want to hear what Shamari thinks, but they're voting with their feet based upon sub-market issues, right, that are on the ground, and also flights to quality and flights to different variety. So where you may be driving down Main Street, or you may be driving, in our town, Main Street or Broadway, and seeing some of those things, some of those businesses didn't make it. Some of them are just simply saying, I'm going to vote and go somewhere else.
Right. Shamari, you touch on this as a real estate owner, but also as an attorney, and you deal with a lot of people. One of the things that comes to mind, I heard another local real estate person we all know mention it this way when talking about like the restaurant industry, and I think maybe you can identify it, was that like at the top level of that restaurant and entertainment world, they're doing fine. The really quality operators, they're doing fine. They're making money. They're doing okay. A lot of the ones that were more like mediocre, shall we say, or marginal, they're all going broke. And so there's a lot of that space that is coming open because they just can't deal anymore with the inflationary costs. And if they have a loan, whatever their interest rate is that they have to readjust to. So what are you seeing as somebody who exists in multiple worlds?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of factors that make it work or don't make a project work. I think in reference to parts of town where you see a lot of for lease signs, a lot of for sale signs, these are spaces that were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And now on the front end, the ownership group of the real estate can't put together a cap stack that allows them to fill some of those financial gaps with incentives. And then on the other side, you can have submarkets that markets have a lot of energy towards. And then that property owner, I'm using my own personal experience, because of the timing, because the market pre and post COVID, I'm giving a rough timeline, but
yeah, sure.
But roughly pre and post COVID, you can adjust to that post COVID market, right? So again, using the cap stack relevance, incentive tools, whether it be local, state, federal, you can feel that. Whereas the property owner, the project before that, didn't have to take that into consideration. You also have the mix of tenants, right? So tenants previously who dealt with labor, materials, food and drink that were at a different price point than they are now have a hard time adjusting. But someone who's coming in to that adjustment period can do so with some due diligence and dated information, right? So I think you have to take all those factors into play as to why some neighborhoods, some projects work and don't work.
Mm-hmm. So how does some of this get worked out? Obviously, anytime there's an adjustment in monetary policy, there's a lag and there's a period of time when things will, adjust. We've talked about this before, but like the first house that I bought, I think the interest rate was probably around 8 or 9%. And for a lot of years, that was like really common.
Yep.
And we all just kind of lived with it.
That's
It was expected. And then we had this long period of historically very cheap interest rates that we've come out of now. So what's your tea leaves? How long does it take for the market to adjust to this reality and for some of that commercial real estate to find its way to productive use?
That's a really good question. And I think, again, I've said this before. If I knew that answer, Kevin, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. I would be sitting in Belize enjoying a cocktail on the beach, right? Because like that's what everyone wants to figure out. Ultimately, in the aggregate, and I will say this as a disclosure, right? Like I am making I was talking to my boss about this before, our market president. I was like, hey, I'm not going to say anything that disrupts the apple cart here. So I'm making no forward indicating statements. I am not a part of the Fed, right? Mm-hmm. So I have no say in this and what happens. But I will tell you, as a banker, lowly community commercial banker, and just as a citizen, right? Just as an individual that has a household, when the Fed gave signals with regard to the possibility of staying stagnant on holding with monetary policy and not pushing forward another rate increase earlier in the year, and continues to be potentially a little mum, but also leaving the door open for a raise or a decrease, right? Like that signal tells me that they either know they screwed up when they maybe gave some forward indicating statements around the potential, or maybe people who interpreted a potential interest rate decrease in this year, like misled people, because you got to be shaking in your boots when you're looking at the inflationary numbers as they come in, and they're tracking at 40 basis points monthly. So annually it's still 5-6%. It's not down to the Fed guidance traditionally of 2%. So we're nowhere near where we need to be from an inflationary standpoint as far as curbing inflation. And the only trigger that the Fed has is raising rates.
Right.
Because there needs to be pain, and we have not experienced pain yet. Again, I think I posted this on social media. I went to the 7-Eleven the other day to pick up a soda for my kiddo because she had a pizza party. And I paid $2.95 with tax for a 20-ounce bottle of root beer. They used to be $1. And that wasn't $1 like 20 years ago. It's like, no, Sonny, like I remember that one. It's 10 cents. See, like no, that was 3-4 years ago. That was $1.
Yeah.
So make it make sense. Like what's happening? Well, what's happening is that there's potentially some greed inflation. However, there's still inflationary concerns on the inputs to make that soda, distribute that soda, sell that soda, all those things being from raw goods to wages, and the wage gap's not keeping up.
Yeah.
So how can you talk about lowering interest rates when also federal fiscal policy, we're spending ourselves into this situation? Right, wrong, or indifferent, right? I'm not against the infrastructure bill in theory, but when you spend money and you put money into the system and people still feel like they're flush with cash one way or another, demand doesn't drop, therefore prices don't drop.
Yeah.
Prices keep going, right? So like we're not going to experience a curb until there's real pain. I don't wish pain, by the way. Like no one wants this pain,
right.
But we got to take our medicine at some point, or else like we spiral into hyperinflation, which is what my biggest fear. I'd rather have some deflation and pain, right, than hyperinflation, because that's a really frightening situation we're entering in.
Yeah, and that's something we really haven't experienced in our lifetime. There was a terrible inflationary period in the 70s and early 80s, which actually we're kind of approaching numbers-wise, but I always think it's funny when people blame it on greed, because it's like, what did greed just magically appear?
Right.
Like this year,
it's a amorphous blob that's out there, and it's just like
corporations just now got greedy.
Right.
I mean,
That's
just part of the human condition. So, is there either one of you can take this? Is there a role at the local level? Is there a local policy or political response that could make a difference in a way that would help benefit the commercial real estate market?
That's a really good question.
So I'll go back to the submarkets. To put it in simple terms, a lot of the spaces that you see empty might have demand, but the price point in which that landlord is asking for, and not to say that he or she as landlord is evil, is trying to milk everything out of the potential tenant, but they have bills to pay too. They likely have a note. And so to the earlier point, we are in an adjustment period, and some of these submarkets that were riding high are now having pain because the price point in which they have to ask for is not meeting the current ability of a tenant to pay. Doesn't mean that there's not demand.
Yeah,
That's exactly right.
yeah.
Right. And so the question is, and I'm not sure if the public sector can fix this. Maybe if we had more time to ruminate and brainstorm, maybe we could come up with a program or something that the public sector to come in and do. But I'll just point to the symptom, and the symptom, I think, just based on my experience, is quite simple, which is the financing of these empty CREs are dated. Is what it comes to. They're dated, right? I think if they were able to lower the asking price of the square footage, they would be filled up. I mean, there are plenty. Jason knows this because he's involved in our projects from a financing side. We have no issues finding tenants. The tenants are out there. The question is, what can they afford based on what you have to borrow? Right. That's
right.
Ultimately, that's
right.
That's the question.
Right. Just like buying a house, like anybody else buying a house, maybe you have enough income that you can afford a house at, whatever monthly mortgage payment.
That's right.
But so let's say that's a $300,000 house, but all that's for sale is $400,000 houses. Well, you can afford the $300,000, but not the $400,000.
That's right.
Couldn't have said it better. That's
right.
exactly the point, right? It's like, what's your debt costs, right? On an operating standpoint, right? What's your debt service and what's your operating expenses? And then you mark to that to make a little bit of developer profit and ownership profit. Well, what does that rate come out to? And if that's $28, then okay. All right. Well, who's out there that's willing to pay $28? The problem is not a lot of people.
It ain't happening. Yeah.
It's just not like, especially in submarkets, urban submarkets, tertiary submarkets, we're talking about old space, second gen space, right? It's like, it just doesn't work that way. Now in the second gen space, you're probably looking at 18 to 20. And yeah, now you're in the second gen, third generation spaces. You're kind of like, all right, well, I have to recap it, which means I have to renovate it, put in TI dollars for you, right? And then that amortized rate is going to be $28. Like if I didn't have to do anything, it might be 18. But if you want me to carry the freight to put you in this space, by the time, and this is cowboy math, right? $28, right? They can't pay that. It's not sustainable. So that's where the incentive conversation comes in. And I don't want to get into too much, like algebraic math to like lose people, right? But like that is why incentives are on the table, especially in urban areas. The other component of that is even if you said, okay, I'll lease this space to you at second gen, depending upon the condition, right? It narrows your pool of tenants, second and third gen space, right? Let's say it was a music shop before or a ballerina studio and you need it to be a restaurant. Well, I'll lease it to you for $14, full, like modified gross, triple net, whatever, right? Well, that means you got to come up with another, like upfront, $50 to $90 a square foot, maybe more, to make it into a restaurant, right?
Yep.
Where are you coming up with that $150,000 potentially? They have to then go get financing, right? Can they afford that debt service? Is a bank willing to lend on leasehold improvements?
Yeah.
A bank usually is not. So then they have to go to friends and family. Do you have enough friends and family in your chain and network of people in order to help float that with cash up front? So it's very, very nuanced. That's why the best projects contemplate the TI up front, if new, or have paid down their bases in the building. What Shamari was talking about earlier is he said a lot of commercial loans were outdated. What I think what you really mean is a lot of bases and properties commercially is outdated.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They paid too much.
It was on pre-COVID numbers.
It was based on money and leverage at 3-4%.
That's
right.
When
right.
leverage is 7%,
Yeah.
and then that's the go for it. And if you had to recap your building, well, then all of a sudden it makes those numbers outrageous. I'll give you another data point. If you talk about pad sites, right? Talk to commercial brokers, because I've been looking into this pad site game for a while, because it's very interesting what national credit triple net tenants are paying, like a Starbucks,
Mhm.
a Andy's, any number of the like real popular concepts. I mean,
Right.
you pick one, right?
Right.
Drive down through suburbia, you'll see them. These guys are willing to pay $50 to $75 triple net or more. Think about that.
Mhm.
What small business can do that on 1,000, 1,500, or 2,000 square feet?
Yeah. Hardly any.
Hardly any, right?
Yeah.
You have to have a going concern that builds automatic traffic.
Yeah.
Doesn't allow for entrepreneurial
Yeah.
small mom and pops, which we all love. No hate against national credits, tenants, right? Because everyone, there's flavor for everybody. But the things that fit best in urban communities, which I know is what,
Mhm.
I mean, just to be like clear, I'm not discriminating against any particular submarket, but we're all kind of urbanists, right? I mean,
Mhm.
we all live in the city. We care about the city. We want to see our city better. We know what fits best is the mom and pop
Yeah, the
local
local
entrepreneur
shops, yeah.
whose dollar circulates within the community and has a multiplying effect.
Yeah, and that's to your point. I mean, that's why when you see new construction, especially larger new construction projects, it's almost always national credit tenant,
Bingo.
That's right.
that are occupying those ground floors.
And Kevin, you've seen this. I mean, you've been a student in this game for a while, and so have you,
Yeah.
Shamari. Like, think about all the mixed use projects. And we may have even talked about this last time, so forgiveness to the audience if you've already heard me talk about this before. But drive through any major metro that's a tertiary. Okay, drive through any tertiary metro urban area and look at mixed use projects.
Mhm.
You'll notice multifamily
5/1.
doing well.
Yeah.
The first floor retail for lease. Why? The basis is too high.
Yeah.
They have to get a national credit tenant in order to make those numbers
Right.
work.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's why.
I would say listening to JCS and going back to what the public sector can do. I think one huge financial hurdle for both landlords / developers and tenants is permitting and the cost and bureaucracy that's tied to permitting.
Mhm.
And my experience is that the cities that do well, part of the reason that they do well in attracting projects and businesses, small or otherwise, is streamlining that process. Being an attorney representing a client who has to deal with that is one thing, but having projects
Mhm.
in which we have a stake in getting to a certificate of occupancy, and then our tenants also having to go through the permitting, particularly when you talk about food and beverage.
Oh God,
right?
it's so hard.
Yeah.
I mean, that food and beverage permitting kills restaurants.
100% it does.
It kills restaurants, and it's a third rail subject because people don't. You don't want to have the licensors mad at you for sharing some of the negativity in terms of the experience, but that kills deals.
Yeah.
It kills deals. So one of the best things I think the public sector can do, municipalities can do, is streamline your permitting process. That will cut out
100%.
a lot of cost.
Yeah.
And make it easier for a landlord to be able to lease to a tenant at a reasonable cost.
Yeah.
I've long said one of the main things the public sector could do is streamline the bureaucracy, right? Like people are, again, incentives are not anyone's favorite thing right now. They are under attack. I get it. I totally understand. There's a reason for that. We can talk about that too. However, you could really eliminate a lot of the incentive conversation by streamlining the bureaucracy. And I am not attacking, like our bureaucracy, it's people, right?
Mhm.
At the end of the day, these are people. So I'm not attacking people.
That's right.
Like these staff members that work at city halls across the country, especially in our city, they're overworked. They're often underpaid.
That's right.
There's not enough of them. So my heart goes out to them. They're just trying to do a job. They're trying to feed their family just like anybody else. And they actually, a lot of them care. Like I know they get, kind of talked about negatively a lot, but they're really just trying to do a job at the end of the day. And some of that is safeguarding like the public good and public safety. Totally get it. However, some of the ancillary things that we have added on through, I'm not going to throw the building code under the bus, but I certainly will throw planning and zoning under the bus. And I don't throw the people under the bus. I throw the philosophies under the bus.
Yeah.
It has created systems of inequity, both in industry, between industry and industry categories,
right,
and also people. And I just don't think it's understood. I don't think they know.
Well, I think there's also the same thing in the building code world. And I think you can look at both of those. And, this is a conversation I was having with somebody the other day. Like originally, the entire point of building codes was to make sure that you had, if there was a fire or a building issue, that you had time to get out of the building.
That's right.
Right. Now it's become like we can never have property damage, whether that's a fire or whatever else. We have to make sure that nothing ever or it's minimal damage to the property itself.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. And so that has added all these layers of regulatory requirements upon doing any kind of building that have that really don't have to do with life safety. They have to do with property issues. Mm-hmm. And it feels like you ought to be able to comply to a different standard. And like we're going to comply to a strict life safety standard.
Oh, I 100% agree.
Which then would maybe carry a different insurance
agree.
rate with your insurer.
100% agree.
But yeah, it's a different level of risk. And I think what you're getting to is like, it's the accumulation of all these things,
That's
the
right.
building code, planning and zoning code, the health department codes, all the things that you have to go through that really, effectively weed a lot of people out who want to do things.
That's right.
And who probably, some of them would be amazing business people, but they just can't get through all of those hurdles.
One of the biggest discrimination inequities in real estate development as a path, or real estate ownership commercially as a path to wealth generation, is not allowing enough people to participate in the process by virtue of not being able to overcome the bureaucracy to do it. Right. When you see a little building on a, tertiary corridor, right? Mm-hmm. Or a corridor that needs some help, you see it empty. Oftentimes someone probably already tried to do something to that building. What happened was they were met with gigantic hurdles to overcome in order to do anything worthwhile, to risk their own capital.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about incentivized partner. I'm talking about somebody that wants to buy a building, and I'm saying this from experience.
Yeah, you've done it.
I have done it. I was the dumbass who wanted to take my own money and to put it in a commercial building. I didn't need anything from you. I just said, let me do it because I want to create something here that I think is needed for the community. And absent having bought it at the right basis and then having a little bit of shekels put away to be able to withstand and endure the time and also bureaucratic hurdles would not have happened. So many people have the creative juices in their communities to go rebuild their communities, but they are boxed out by the administrative, bureaucratic planning and zoning process. Mm-hmm. I think life safety really should just rule the day. Mm-hmm. Life safety is what should rule the day. Sure, some degree of design aesthetics, right? I mean, I get a city wants to make sure that it has a beautiful city, but far too often, right, we relax those for some and not for others. Case in point. And we can get into what I think one of the things that you guys might want to talk about. You talk about the Family Dollars of the world.
Yeah.
If you want to put so many restrictions over somebody taking a small building at 59th and Prospect and putting something in it that can be additive to a community, and where they're willing to risk their own dollars to do it, and you want to put all the hurdles in the world, but then let Family Dollar come in, knock down a couple buildings, take a lot, and put a Butler building on it with, like the cheapest construction possible because they complied with maybe some of the stuff but not all the stuff. You let them do that ad nauseum. Why? Is it some economic development win just because it's a national corporation? Like, why do that? Like that to me makes no sense, because these things, they have oftentimes parking frontage in front of them to the right of way, setbacks that are more suburban, that are not additive to a neighborhood,
and
curating walking,
and a crappy building,
and these curb cuts that make no sense.
Yeah, and it's a national company that all the profits are going out of town.
Exactly.
So
I'll use this example, then get off this horse. So we have a brewer as a tenant, great brewing company, and we went through C of O, certificate of occupancy permitting process with the city, and the gentleman that we work with was very communicative. To Jason's point, he tried his best to work with us, but at the end of the day, the code and what was required, even if not boots on the ground relevant, we as a landlord and they as a tenant had to do. Thankfully, for a multitude of reasons, we were able to get through that. It cost us some dollars on the contractor side in terms of management of the project, in terms of contingency, etc. I have friends who attempted to open up a brewery in your neighborhood, Kevin.
Yeah.
Great building. They're actually well-financed, professionals, etc. Because of a handful of requirements that the city was asking them, was demanding of them to do, that in my mind, at least as they tell it, weren't really relevant to running a brewery, they're still not open.
Yeah.
So you have a local couple who's well-financed, both in terms of equity and ability to access debt capital, in an urban building that was not previously being used, in a walkable neighborhood, who literally has equipment in there right now to make beer.
Yeah.
They cannot open because of a handful of requirements that the city has on its books.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the perfect example of what stops small business owners from working within cities that take that approach.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that kind of relates, if I were to just a slight pivot, because I think it's related. This other article that I shared with you, which is about this new development in Spring Hill, Kansas, which is on the fringe of our metro area. It's an article about like yet another 300 unit subdivision being built on the edge of the city. And so let me just, maybe I'll just vent for a minute.
Give a little bit of preamble here.
And just kind of get your reaction. So part of my frustration in all of this, as certainly somebody who is an advocate for the urban areas. I live and work in the urban part of town. I love it. I care about it.
Same.
I want it to thrive. A lot of the same people, fellow travelers in our world, have very little understanding of the fact that like 90 to 95% of the development that's happening in our metro area is on the fringe. It's all in the suburbs or the exurban areas. And yes, most of it is suburban style in nature. It doesn't appeal to the three of us necessarily, but it appeals to a lot of people. But I think more than anything, what I think we kind of forget is, it's like, we've talked about this before. It's like we have this issue we have in the urban area where we just seem to fight each other over every stupid little project. And we have these issues with the bureaucracy that make it so hard to do things that should be simple. And at the same time as we're like doing this like hand-to-hand combat over development projects, and every little development project takes 2 years, 3 years to happen. In the meantime, on the fringes of our metro, every municipality is just like, game on, welcome, open arms. We're going to pave the way to make it easy for you to build and develop. Right. And so we are missing, and I don't know how many of those people who are moving to Spring Hill would live in my neighborhood or your neighborhood or whatever. I don't know. Maybe most of them would not, but maybe 15% would. Maybe there's enough of a slice of the people doing business out there that think they want to be in the city, and that would be really cool. And then they try to do something and they're like, oh my God, it's so freaking hard. Whereas I can go to one of these other cities and, I can be open for business in 60 days. And so I feel like we have this, there is this, just a lack of understanding on the part of a lot of people that we exist in this competitive context. And if we don't figure those things out, it's not just that like something takes forever to happen. It's that we're missing out on all this opportunity that could happen in our part of town.
It's very true. I want to say so many things, but I guess I'll start here. And Sho is probably better after this because he's a historian. He's like our resident historian amongst our friend group.
He is, it's true.
And again, I probably said this on the last podcast. I wrote a thesis paper back when I was in grad school about incentives and Kansas City's use of incentives. And the issue has become that they are perverted to do things like greenfield infrastructure projects to help spur more sprawl by virtue of blighting a piece of farmland, because under Chapter 353, you're allowed to do that because one of the conditions is you can declare blight when a piece of land is not up to its highest and best use. Mm-hmm. Why do I bring that up when you're talking about Spring Hill? Because that really relates to the Northland, because Spring Hill, for those who are either out of town or not aware, Spring Hill is in Kansas. We share a state line with Kansas, Johnson County. Johnson County has better schools. God bless it. I wish you could edit that out. I would not say better schools. It has a different caliber of a tax base that affords different quality outcomes in education. Because of that, it has different socioeconomics. And so people, again, vote with their feet because, again, when you're talking about paying your mortgage and your property tax, you can afford private schools, move to Kansas. Okay, yep. That's a really quick analysis. But the reason why I bring that incentive example up is because what those incentives were meant for, while they were used in Kansas City back in 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, early aughts, we did build some suburban developments to compete with Johnson County and our Northland, which has similar prospects with regard to education and opportunities and all of those things. The reason we did that is because we needed to grow our tax base, because we said, hey, well, we have some land, we can do that too. Well, the difference or the problem is that those incentives, because they're reverted, that happened, and now they get sparsed and spread and attacked when they should have been used in urban core brownfields to create economically viable alternatives for people to choose urban living and urban places to do business, right? Now, when you have cheap land out on the fringe, the economics become better, the bureaucracy is better, because I always say, like, as a lowercase d developer, lowercase I investor, like little guy, it's like there's three things. There's the economic risk, there's the construction risk, there's the bureaucratic risk. Yep. I might fight two of those things. Right. I ain't fighting all three. I don't. It's impossible. Yeah. The odds are not in my favor, right? So you need help when you have all three of those risks. You have to fight, because comparatively on a greenfield in Johnson County, Kansas, you don't have those same things. Right. You have economics in your favor. You have bureaucracy in your favor. You have socioeconomics in your favor, even. Yeah. Right. So, like, we have created this problem. We continue to perpetuate it by virtue of not living up to the ideals of some of the solutions we've already created in these incentives. Right. Not just Chapter 353, all of them. Right. So that's one of the main issues. The other issue is you have to look at the realities on the ground. We can't ignore some of the sub-market issues when it comes to being competitive. Yeah. Again, we talked about education outcomes. There's also public safety outcomes, right? There's affordability. I mean, really, to build a house in an urban neighborhood, you pick a lot. Again, it's the same almost construction costs. You might, even if you got the lot for $1, right? To build a house that is considered competitive, quote unquote, and saying all things equal, where would you choose to live? It's $300,000 to $400,000 to build a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath house that's 2,000 square feet, right?
Yep.
Add the lot costs on top of that. In those submarkets, probably 350 to 400, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Kansas City, by the time you add all the bureaucratic noise into it, what comes out in your budget, I guarantee you, it's Cowboy Matt, I guarantee you, is you add another $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
Between the design requirements, the planning and zoning requirements, the time it takes you to build something. This is why people don't go to neighborhoods that are, in our area, it's East of Troost or however you want to say that, and build $300,000, $400,000 houses, right? Because the economic risk would be too great because you don't know if they would sell. Some of them do, right? Some of them do. But when you're taking a chance, you got to build to a higher income level.
Yeah.
And that pool of buyers, if we parse it out, when we're talking about $400,000 situation, you can't compete with a greenfield $400,000 house versus a brownfield $400,000 house. It's just not competitive because all the other things, like, it's in their favor in the greenfield.
Yeah, no doubt.
That is why people are developing in mass, not to mention the availability of land, all the things you talked about, right? So it's so nuanced. This is why we need all the incentive tools on the table right? And we also need bold leadership to help spur development in neighborhoods and curate, not gentrification, but alternatives and competitive alternatives to that. That's always going to happen. That cat's already out the bag.
Mm-hmm.
And we also need to focus on some of our other issues as well. Public safety.
Mm-hmm.
We need to focus on education outcomes. All of those things to make this a competitive argument when someone's saying, hey, where do I go spend my dollar?
Yeah.
I agree with 98% of what Jason said.
Let's get into the 10%.
Let's get
I do want to add a little bit of color.
Yeah.
To his statements. One is that very rarely. So I have an incentive agency as a client.
Mm-hmm.
The incentive agency, the city, doesn't create projects. Projects come to the incentive agency / municipality. So even if, and I would agree, in an ideal world, you would utilize what you got. You would utilize the infrastructure, the built environment that already exists, as opposed to continue to spread it out, making the city thinner, making it more expensive structurally.
Mm-hmm.
However, there's only so much the city / incentive agencies can do because they're not creating the projects. They're reacting to projects that are on there, that are at their desk. That dominoes into this. Again, agreeing with JCS in terms of the ability for the public sector to be able to, through ordinance and code language, to incentivize folks to build on brownfields as opposed to greenfields. However, the statutory language that creates the incentives is at a state level. It's not at a municipal level. So for good or for ill, Jeff City, when creating and maintaining that language, does not just think about one city's interests or concerns. They're thinking about the state's interests or concerns.
Right.
And so I highly doubt Jeff City will ever, or Topeka for that matter, or name your state capital. You have a broader listening audience than just Missouri.
Going national, folks.
Presuming that said state is the one who drafts the incentive policy in statutory language, they're not just thinking about one particular city within their state.
Yeah.
And so we have a natural issue in our form of democracy, in that the states are the ones who draft that language in regards to incentives, right? And so they're not necessarily concerned with the specific issues that are happening with one particular city in their state at that time. And two, most cities and incentive agencies don't have the authority or power, and maybe they shouldn't, to create projects that would come into a submarket that might need it more than the outer edge. All that being said, I agree with Jason, but the complication is within that color, right? And how do you navigate that process?
Yeah. And one, I think if I were to zoom out, I agree what you said earlier, Jason. The incentive tools, spent a lot of complications with those. I understand why people don't like them. I understand why they've been controversial. But the reason they were created in the first place was because there was a competitive imbalance.
That's right.
In the region. That's right. And it is cheaper and easier to build on the edge of the city. The school districts, whether you agree with it or like it or not, they have a much better reputation. I actually think the schooling situation has probably improved in Kansas City, but
KCPS is going to come after me because of these statements, right? Like Kathleen Pointer is going to call me after this.
But irrelevant of if it's, and I don't mean to go on the sidebar on school, any urban school district, every major city has this conversation,
right?
And I will caveat, I don't have kids, so I don't have a direct not to say I don't have a direct interest because I live in the city.
Yeah, you have,
but I don't have a direct experience.
Right, but there's a huge market. There's a huge market of people who are families that are looking for a place to live.
That's right.
And they're gonna, that market generally is going to look for what is the safest place for me to live with my kids, with the best school system that I can afford to live in. And with the lowest taxes.
And it might not be, what I was going to get at is it might not be based on fact.
Totally.
The reputation, even if it's dated, is what's most important. The opposite can be said as well.
Yeah.
The reputation of a school district might be great.
Yeah.
But the reality, the boots on the ground might not be as great as what people think it is.
Yeah. School districts deteriorate too. Good ones could go bad. And so anyway, it was like the overall competitive market for investing in the city was at a disadvantage. And so we created incentive tools to try to overcome that. And I think what happened naturally over time is those incentive tools were pretty successful. They did create a lot of investment. They there certainly was a lot of fraud as well, and bad investments, but it created a desire on the part of people to invest in the city. They got successful. And then, as is typical, we started gradually layering more and more and more requirements on the ability to use those incentive tools, to the point now where they're not terribly useful anymore for most projects. And then when you couple that with the other disadvantages that an area has competitively, it creates a huge problem. And like in the area that I care about, in the Midtown area, basically development has come to a standstill because it's just, there just isn't that risk reward profile like there is on the edge of the city. So again, I don't like that. I want to see development in my part of town, but the risk reward profile is still positive for a lot of stuff on the edge of the city. It's just not positive anymore for my part of town.
That's right. I think an urban environment, I was going to use Manhattan, New York City, but that's not fair because that's not apples to apples.
God, no.
But let's say downtown Austin. I think that's a decent cop. Downtown
in our dreams.
Downtown Nashville. My point is that because of all of those hurdles that we had referenced previously, you still have to make the juice worthy of the squeeze.
Yes.
Right. And so someone might also have the same bureaucratic issues in Nashville or Austin. My guess is that probably exists. That's my guess. The difference is that the return on that work and that investment is very high.
Yeah.
Higher foot traffic, lots of tourism, so on and so forth. So the dollars are coming in those markets as compared to, and we've done a good job of trying to bring in tourism dollars, and, we're on every single top XYZ list and so on and so forth. However, if we're going to speak in reality, those tourism dollars, that foot traffic doesn't touch what our other peer cities that I just mentioned
Correct.
have. And
Yeah,
so
totally true.
so if I'm a small business owner, generally speaking, there are obviously exceptions. I'm looking at the submarket or quote unquote urban core, and then I'm looking at a wealthy upper middle class suburban or near suburban area. And yes, it might not be as quote unquote cool, right? Maybe not. But I know I'm going to get a certain amount of traffic. I know I'm not going to have to, whether real or perceived, deal with some of the public safety issues. And the upside might be a little higher in the city, but long term, I don't have to deal with all this other mess.
Yeah.
So I do it.
It comes down to risk, right? It's like, what risk are you willing to accept? Like I said, all those three, but then that bucket of risk, right? And you could probably add even more, right? But you've got all of the buckets in the bucket of risk. You got the economic risk, the construction risk, the socioeconomic risk. You've got the bureaucratic risk. I mean, you can't fight all of those and create something.
Yeah.
To create something, you have to have something on your side in order to make the juice worth the squeeze.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
You know, I want to say something else though. I think our city, you know, I'm not going to hate on our city. I love our city. This town has been
It's great.
too good to me for me to hate on it, right? Just ad nauseum. I'm going to call it out for some of the things I think are either inequities or things I know we can do better at, because that's what we're supposed to do as human beings. I mean, we're here and we live a life. I'm a strong believer that you live a life and you try to make it better than when you left it. And you try to care about the people who are trying to do the right things, and you help them. And the people who can't, you try to help them as well. And so that's how we have to curate an orderly society, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're in a different chapter in our city.
Mm-hmm.
We're in a different chapter in our city because we feel like we've made it. Now, we can argue about whether we've not made it or whatever, but I would say we're approaching that stratosphere. Kansas City's on the map.
Mm-hmm.
What it takes now is bold steps. Some of our incentive legislation, public policy is outdated. It was meant for the late 80s, 90s, and early aughts.
Mm-hmm.
We've evolved, right? So we need to revisit a lot of it. This is why people are upset. You know why people are upset at the end of the day? It's because they don't feel, especially in the urban, like the Kansas City urban core, I would say, and that includes inner city and areas that are thriving, right? They don't feel like they've all participated in the wins equitably. You get what I'm saying by that?
Mm-hmm.
There's parts of town that have won. Crossroads has won, right? I know you don't feel like it, but Midtown has won. Not completely, not as maybe as best as the Crossroads, but that's because you have, again, there's a difference between commercial tendency and then commingled commercial and housing and neighborhoods and legacy, right? Commercially, Midtown's come a long way. I would argue housing has come a long way. The problem is that it's not been equitable. Like, let's just call it what it is. Instead of us wearing our developer and capitalist hats and going, hey, man, we just need these incentives to make these projects worse, build, baby, build. Yeah. We can no longer do that. That's not where we are. We have to start to utilize some of the wins that we have had to reach back and pull up neighborhoods and people that don't feel like they've participated in the winning trajectory of this city equitably. And people are pissed off about incentives and pissed off about development. Why? Because it's not been fair. It's not been fair. Let's just be honest. It hasn't.
How much of that do you think it's because it's seen as a big boy game and not benefiting mom and pop regular people?
I think that's the biggest problem. Yeah. I was part of an initiative. I will say that. I don't want to disclose too much, but I was a part of an initiative. We're talking about incentives. And one of the things I said during this initiative was, when are we going to stop chasing whale projects in order to post up big wins, right? To say, hey, we're successful. Like, it's not about the whales anymore. I'm not saying from an economic development, and I'm not attacking any agencies, any people. I'm leaving names out to protect the innocent, because they're just doing their job. They're doing what they're incentivized to do. What I'm saying is the incentives are wrong. Like, and I'm not talking about incentives, large I, a capital I, from like a policy. I'm talking about just the economic and people incentives, right? It's like, hey, we're incentivized. Like, hey, man, like, you want to win? Get a big job, get a big development to come in, a lot of jobs, big square footage, and be able to say, hey, we brought this in and we competed against these other communities.
Yeah.
And whatever we gave them, it was worth it. That was the ROI. Like, we're going to get ROI. Fact of the matter is, I would argue, the ROI is historically not there for those whale projects.
Mm-hmm.
They take the dollars, they're multinational corporations, and they go outside of our community almost immediately.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have the staying power, as is being proven, again, without naming names, but anyone that's educated on the subject can just go research projects that received incentives that are leaving town,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where they have built massive things. Okay. They don't have staying power. We should be, one, applying incentive policy on a much more macro level, or micro level, not macro, micro.
Yeah.
And it should be dispersed and adjudicated to mom and pop's small wins just as feverishly as it is to whales. But the way the organizations are built that do this, they're not incentivized to do these things.
Well, yeah, and it's kind of like the same problem you have in real estate with it's easier to do one big deal than to do 100 small deals because they all take time.
Yeah.
So it's, a really funny thing that you may like, back in about 1993 or 4, the first letter to the editor that I wrote of the Kansas City Star that actually got published was that we should have, that our economic development incentive tools should be incentivizing housing first and foremost. It ought to be simple that, like, if you buy a house in the urban core or whatever, then you get like a 10-year incentive or something, like flat out. Just like it ought to be something simple, because the idea was everything flows from housing and residency. And once you have enough people, like commercial development follows residential development. If you don't have the rooftops, you're not going to have commerce. And so that it was kind of that, to that point, that like, instead of going after the whale projects, we should incentivize a whole lot of the little stuff.
I do think to add to that, I'm gonna defend my practice and some folks in my network.
Yeah.
There are tools available for that quote unquote small developer who wants to take on some pretty challenging projects. I think part of the issue, to add to Jason, so this is not to subtract what he said, but it's, again, to add a little bit of nuance, is that I think the other issue is strictly information. Is that we're, all of us are kind of urbanist, professional nerds who are in an echo chamber and talk about this day to day and know about XYZ thing. But the vast majority, for the vast majority of people, it's not their job. So they don't need to know it professionally. But if they want to take on said small multifamily project to build some decently affordable housing in a neighborhood, there are, as an example, within a particular area of our city, I'm sure others, a 10-year 100% abatement that's more or less automatic, right? To use an example.
Yeah.
The problem is, my experience is that people just don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And even if they know, then the processes that it takes to get there, you have to be at City Hall or the county or both in person within working hours. Those other folks have jobs. They're also working during working hours, right? Sometimes the language is difficult, right? They might not have a budget to hire a lawyer or whatever to figure out what the heck is going on. So there's and again, I don't think this is necessarily nefarious, but the processes make it difficult to either know about these things that could help build these smaller projects, or the language and the folks that need to be involved to make the project happen are difficult to get to.
Well, I think what interests me is like it feeds into the kind of populist moment, that we're in right now, which is that there are these programs and administrative things that we've set up and everything that most people just feel are not working for them. Mm-hmm. Like they work really well for people who are well connected, who can afford the the 4 attorneys that work on all this stuff. Not saying you, Show, because Show's actually very affordable.
Don't say that.
I don't mean he's cheap.
It's all relative. Edit all relative. It's all relative.
I mean he's affordable. Like you should.
I'm trying to get my higher game up over here. I'm trying to. You know what I mean? Like we gotta pump those fees up. Pump them up. Pump them numbers up. Pump them up.
Appreciate you.
No, I should say you should go hire the man.
Yeah.
But so there's a lot of this stuff that doesn't work really well, but I think that there's an interesting, like the counter, it's not necessarily a counterpoint, but it's the reason for them to exist is still there. Like the reason they were created in the first place is like, it's more expensive to develop in the urban core by far. It's harder, more expensive, takes longer. And there's less of a market that wants it than on the edge of town. And so like those things are still true. But there is this reaction to the way we have done business for a lot of years that feeds the feeling on a lot of people's part that they just don't work, or they're only working for a very, very small subset of people. And I'm not saying that's not true. I think there is a lot of truth to that. But it's kind of indicative of the conversation for a lot of things.
That's right. It's two different things. Are there tools out there that would help the quote unquote small developer property owner who just wants to do a really cool thing in their neighborhood, right? Yes. Those tools are out there.
Yeah.
Does that same person, as an example, have the ability to access the information necessary to know that, and then B, have the time and capital to access it, even if the necessary capital to access it is smaller than it would be for quote unquote larger incentive tools? That latter part is the difficulty.
Yeah.
The tools are there, right? It's the accessibility and getting out the information that I think is
and I think to JCS's earlier point, for a lot of small developers, at least my experience, the greatest incentive would be just an easy administrative process, easy permitting, easy administrative.
That's right.
And it's not even so much the financial tools. So it's like knowing that I have this idea that I can actually see it to completion.
Yeah. I mean, in a sense, it's lowercase I, not capital I, incentivizing folks to get in the game. Yeah. By making it easier. There needs to be some capacity building. Let's be clear. There needs to be some capacity building in a lot of these communities where you have very capable people, but for their socioeconomic and historical disenfranchisement, could participate in this. I've seen it. I know it. I know it. That's right. One of the reasons why I'm still in banking, I still consider banking to be a noble profession. When we do what we're supposed to do, we can help. We're not necessarily the arbiter of winners and losers, right? I often say we're in the pool of picking winners from a pool of potential winners already. But without us, we may not be the gasoline that helps, fuel the engine and drive economic growth. We're certainly the oil. The gasoline is the creative spirit, the American spirit of entrepreneurs. That's really what that is. We can't allow that to be disheartened. But from a banking standpoint, it's noble when we can step into either the gap or a need and also be counselors, coaches, right? And help deploy capital and take some bets on people for these things to happen. That's why I still do what I do as a banker. This is why I haven't hung up my banking, hat and put my suits all away or sold them, right? It's like, because we're necessary, right? I still believe in it. Let me say this. When I was talking about we're at a different phase in our city, and we're going to talk about, because we're in Kansas City, we're going to talk about Kansas City because that's what we know. I would argue, if I was emperor for a day, here's what I would do. I would tell you what we need to do in order to change this conversation and propel our city forward. We're now entering a phase where, okay, we've done a lot of things on the private sector that have been private partner projects or partnerships that have been driven primarily privately. Because like you said, you're very apt at this, right? It's like cities don't make projects, right? Someone comes to the city and says, they have a project, and are you going to make it easy or hard? Do you want to do it? Is this fit your vision? The smart ones go, hey, city, does this fit what you want to do? Does this align? Then they go to the neighborhood and they say, hey, does this align with what you guys want to do? Does this work for you? And then everyone says yes, and then we have a project, right? I think, to go back to public education, we have long since, as urbanists, and I mean that globally or nationally at least, ignored what public education outcomes mean to progress. We act like, we'll let all the yuppies come in, and those that can afford to live here or want to live here, they'll live here, and they're all single people. It's not true. One of the reasons why Spring Hill is happening, I would guess that if you looked at household formation in the Midwest, you by the way, you need a Jamie, by the way, like Joe, you need somebody to be
somebody go look that up. Google that real quick,
because someone's gonna put in comments on your deal. It was like this guy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. I would argue that if you looked at household formation in the United States versus the Midwest is higher. I don't know the number.
It is,
but
yeah.
Let's say household formation across the nation in the aggregate is 1.75. I would argue in the Midwest, in a city like Kansas City, is probably 2.5 to 2.75. Okay. Yep. I would argue that.
I think that's true.
So those folks are moving there. Those are the people that have 3 to 4 people in a house, and they need the space.
Yeah.
Right. And it's too much to buy a house that fits that bill to fit those people in an urban community. And they have household outcomes they need to make sure are good, like public education of their kids.
Yep.
That's right.
To be clear, the Kansas City public school system has one of the hardest jobs in education amongst our local collection of municipalities. KCPS, Hickman Mills, Center, these districts, KCK, deal with largely disenfranchised communities with socioeconomic, historical issues that are tough. If you hear some of the stories from these teachers, it is heartbreaking, the things that you will hear that these kids have to deal with. These are people.
Yeah.
So what I would argue is we're entering a phase where it's like we need to figure out how to stand up CDCs in those spaces, community development corporations, that also work on other holistic outcomes, including housing, that serve their constituents. Instead of us attacking each other on this incentive issue in the public landscape, we're urbanists. You and all of us are capitalist urbanists. We want to see placemaking happen, ultimately. Yeah. We're probably less capitalist than most people that would do it, right? Or else we'd all go do self-storage or or trailer park home, or whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
The city of Kansas City, Missouri needs holistic outcome treatment using bricks and sticks, as well as holistic measures to create centers of housing that deal with some of the trauma issues in these communities so that we can start to elevate the outcomes. Right? There's a group in Harlem. I think it's called the Harlem Education Project. I can't remember. Again, I wish you had a Jamie. Like, they did this in a neighborhood, right? They took a neighborhood and said, hey, we are going to invest in this neighborhood, and we're going to invest so holistically. Housing, healthcare, job, workforce creation, so on and so forth. That's what we need to do now so that we can start to elevate the outcomes more equitably.
I think that's what we're trying to do in Vine from a private sector perspective. I mean, a lot. Just using
KC, Chef Shanita.
Well,
even one of she's trying to do,
and the other developers and tenants, kind of lightning in a bottle, but housing plus cultural institutions plus commercial. That's what we're trying to do. And it's hard.
Yeah. I mean, one of the more interesting ones was the one started in Atlanta called Purpose-Built Communities, which was actually started by a developer in Atlanta. And it was built around a charter school and daycare and everything. And the whole notion was we're going to integrate housing, education, and job opportunities together in a neighborhood. And that model, he's taken that model nationwide. There's one in Omaha. There was one here for a time period that was affiliated with Diane Cleaver's group.
Urban Neighborhood
Urban
Initiative?
Neighborhood
Yeah,
Initiative. They're still around.
Yeah,
You and I.
but I
still
think that kind of fell apart. But when I was in Savannah, I was working with a group of people that was trying to do a purpose-built community in Savannah. But that was the concept. It was, and part of that was actually the charter school. The developer felt like the charter school was integral to that.
Yeah.
Because it was removing the overhead of the district-wide administration and focusing it just on a school in that neighborhood.
I'll just say you don't real quick. I don't think you, again, using Vine as an example, I think the CDC model makes a lot of sense. My point is you don't necessarily need to have that. So again, using Vine as an example, you have Lincoln High School within the district, one of the top rated high schools in the country. Right. You have our projects that have great tenants. You have other developers and tenants within the district, whether it be in the arts, whether it be in entertainment, whether it be cultural institutions. If you have an organized approach, again, whether it be formally on the CDC or informally as people who have some connection to said area, and say, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to organize it. You have folks like Jason who are willing to stick their neck out from a financial standpoint and make it work. We can do this. And it's so important for cities like ours, which are most cities in the country, actually, that have our demographics. All the links have to be strong. You can invest $1 billion into areas that are already stabilized. Okay. But at the end of the day, people have movement. People see inequity. People understand when things aren't right. And unless you stabilize these other parts of the city, I'm not saying they have to be the Ritz, right? But there has to be a standard. There has to be a standard. And the best cities, nationally or globally, have that higher standard, irrelevant of where you are in that city.
I 100% agree. I 100% agree. And, one of the interesting things, I know you say it doesn't have to be a CDC, but shout out to Emmett Pearson, right? And Community Builders.
No.
You need 10 more Emmett Pearsons
to
really make something like that go. You need 10 more Terrell Jollies, right?
Sure.
Integrity Capital Management. Shout out to Terrell, TJ.
They do great work.
TJ's a good friend of mine, right?
He's not just your friend.
Yeah.
He's my friend too.
He's your friend. He's your friend too.
TJ Show's got, dude.
Yeah. Show's got your back.
See what Jason's trying to do.
Yeah. I know. And I'm mocking you. No, we're at I see to where we are now as such a big opportunity, because I remember where we were in a point in time where you want to talk about inequity, like a show would not have been here 20 years ago having this conversation. We wouldn't be talking about it, TJ. We wouldn't be talking about it in Emmett, right? Like, we need to make involvement in this game, so to speak, right? More. We need to make people like Show, people like Emmett, people like TJ, people like myself, people, ubiquitous, where it's the norm, because it elevates the conversation, right? This is why, not to get on a huge soapbox, but this is why diversity and inclusion matters, right? Is because I often say, even before, just talk about the business of banking, outside of diversity and inclusion, I don't care if you're white, black, purple, pink, yellow, it doesn't matter. What I care more about is your why. We lend money to people. People pay us back. A good friend of mine in my office professionally, Charlie Benson, he's a longtime banker in the city, legacy Kansas Cityan, right? He told me that once, and it was like, bingo, that's it. That's why we do what we do. It's the people, right? So people elevate the conversation. People who come from these communities elevate the conversation. This is why you need to allow more universal and equitable involvement in this industry, because if you only have people that look a certain way, act a certain way, and it's homogenous, you're going to keep ending up with the same outcomes. We cannot allow that. We cannot do that. That does not do us good. And we're going to be the worst for it, frankly. It's going to be a point of diminishing returns. You have to involve more energy and creative juices in the process. All people need to be able to come to the table, right?
Yeah.
So, my hope is that, like, as we talk about these things and people get inspired, right, we start to also break down some of the institutional barriers that allow people to get involved. Like, that's one of the most key pieces.
Yeah. So I think the vast majority of people agree with that. And I think what's interesting, we probably don't have time for it today. Maybe we can do it on another podcast. Is the question is always like, how do you get there? Like, okay, that's the goal. I think most everybody who's a decent person agrees on the goal. Question is, what's the best way to get there? What's the most effective way to get there in the shortest amount of time?
I have ideas, but
yeah, because I mean, it'd be interesting, and this may be, this may be an impossible question to answer, or not enough time today. I don't know, but like in like the Vine District, I think we may have talked about this once before. But what if it's like 20 years from now, and the Vine District is revitalized, and there's all this new housing and new commerce, and it's thriving and it's doing great, but the demographics look like Crossroads. I mean, is that success
in terms of customer base or ownership?
Both.
Okay.
I mean, is that success or not? And because I think there's that is kind of one of the questions in this business. It does get to a lot of what Jason was talking about, like who gets involved, who owns it, who's doing the things, but also who are the people that are interested in living in a place or moving into a place. And
sure,
I mean, those are hard questions. And I mean,
they're tough. They're so tough.
You don't have to answer it now, but it's maybe we can.
I think
it's definitely for another show. Like that specific subject matter could fill a couple hours.
Yeah.
That's why I think it's important to talk about the why behind things.
Yeah.
Right. It's
exactly.
like where I maybe left off and perhaps didn't bring to a proper crescendo is like the reason why I dig into the why first is because the why matters. It's where somebody's passion lies. For me as a banker, it's like how I know they're going to pay me back.
And it's going to get them through. This is hard. We all know this in this room and probably most, if not all of your listeners, this is hard.
Yeah.
Right. And so passion oftentimes the only thing that gets you through it.
Yeah.
It ain't the money. Sometimes
there's easier ways to make money.
Sometimes it's the credit, right? Yeah. But that's fleeting.
People forget.
It's fleeting.
Yeah.
It's the passion. And so what I would add to JCS is that I would, if I was on his side, amongst other things to analyze, it's like, man, this guy or gal, like they're about it, right? They're willing to sacrifice time, sleep, a little bit of sanity to make this work. Right? Like that's it. Like that's what gets you through.
Well, this was cool, guys. I mean, for me, I don't know what listeners like or don't like always, but what I enjoy, I like talking about the things that people don't like to talk about,
Indeed.
Or that people are afraid to talk about, or for whatever reason, just don't get a lot of time and attention. So, I think in our tiny little urbanist world, the fact that we just don't talk about the fact that like the vast majority of the city is growing on the edge for some obvious reasons. And why aren't we growing? If that's one of those topics, we're like, yay, we have affordable housing. We have 20 units of affordable housing being built. In the meantime, there's 10,000 apartments being built, on the edge of town. And then these other issues, like what does revitalization for Vine District or similar parts of town, what does that mean? What does it look like? I think those are really interesting things to maybe dive deeper into and talk about, because just people don't like to talk about that stuff.
Yeah. And they're and those questions are universal.
Yeah.
They're not specific to Kansas City.
Yeah, exactly.
Like your listeners in any part of the country are dealing with and
Yeah,
equivalent.
It's so relevant. Yeah.
So, so we'll dive into that next
Sure.
time. All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's been almost an hour and a half, so I feel like even though we could, like the three of us could go on.
I was ready to go.
I'm ready to go. Like,
Well, if there's something else,
I just got going.
I thought you were going to get into why JCS called me a yuppie. But
I'm
well, hey
100%
man,
ready to get into that.
if the fancy hat fits, wear it.
Shots fired. Hey man, like I again, it was a friendly comment. It was built is made
Just
in jest,
messing with you.
but it's issues that everyone's facing.
Yeah.
I do. So I thought we were going to touch on that, and I will say,
Go ahead.
I will
Let's
say,
touch it. You
well,
have time to touch on
Yeah,
it?
I got time.
well, I will say one thing, and it is relevant to something you said earlier. Either it was earlier in your last podcast about quote unquote they.
Yeah.
And you referenced beauty.
Yeah.
And then we talked about environment and how environment affects the way people react to their city.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes, whether it be a city or a community, we have low standards.
Mm.
I think a big problem with our current culture is low standards.
I agree. And I used to be in a band called Low Standards.
That's awesome.
Did you know that?
I knew you was in a band. I didn't know the name.
that was the name.
Because your bandmate is my neighbor.
Justin?
Yes.
Oh, Jesus.
It was 2 houses up from
How
me.
funny. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. But yeah, anyway, sorry to interrupt.
Welcome to the Insiders.
I know. It was getting real. This is how incestuous Kansas City is.
In any event, what to bring you all into our kind of internal conversation, we're somewhat serious, somewhat in jest, talking about was the potential of a couple of national chain pharmacy locations closing. And Jason had pointed this out offline that this is a national trend. But what my argument was I've been to other cities in which these national chains built urban, aesthetically pleasing shops.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen them.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, they decided not to do that here in Kansas City. I think that's a travesty. And the only reason they do that is because we allow it.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think the interesting thing is the one on Independence Avenue that's closing is actually pretty good.
And I like that one.
That was actually
the one I said.
Pretty well done.
Yeah.
The two that you and I most know in Midtown are awful. And they're just very typical. We can say they're awful. They're just typical, CVS, Walgreens.
They should not be in an urban environment, is my point. If they wanted to build that out in the suburbs, fine. But the only reason they build that is because we, as citizens, and then through our representation, allow it.
Yeah. And because we had a sense of desperation.
Right. And so my point
we'll
was
accept anything, please.
Right. And my point was we have to have higher standards. If we're going to get to that next level that JCS was referencing, we have to have a collective understanding is that we're worth it.
Yeah.
We're worth it.
Yeah, but see, here's where I feel like I'm going to pull a Paul Mooney from like Chappelle Show right now. It's like, no, I disagree. Like, I don't necessarily disagree. Here's where my point was. Those locations, not just in Kansas City, but nationally in urban centers, they're closing them. Probably one because of some competitive e-commerce pressures.
Sure.
Yeah.
Upsetting both pharmaceutical sales, like distribution
that's the
points.
big thing. Yeah.
Well, that I'm going to absolutely disagree with. I don't think it's the biggest thing.
Oh, okay.
The other one is the goods they sell that are probably also reasonably decent margin, all the sundries and things of the nature that they sell, right? Problem is they're facing so much theft on those items.
Yeah.
Coming out of those stores because
Now that
of
is
public
fair.
safety issues.
I agree
And
with
they're
that.
closing.
Yeah.
So we continue to act like, okay, again, back like to the public school situation. It's like, well, crime is just normal. Like bad schools are normal if you're going to live in an urban community. And why should I care? I only have it's just me and my wife. We're two dual income, like no
Yuppies.
kids,
Two
two yuppies,
yuppies.
right? Or crime! Someone's just gonna break into my car, or someone's all like, no. To your point, it's low standards. That is not normal.
Yeah. I agree.
We should not accept that. Like two things can be true. Yes, we can live in an urban environment and we can have like some crime issues based on socioeconomics, it doesn't mean we should let them slide. And right now they're sliding.
Yeah.
I don't want to throw anybody on the bus, but they're sliding.
Yeah.
And people don't feel safe. And these retailers are making an economic decision along all the other issues and pressures that they're facing that, hey, the juice is no longer worth the squeeze.
Yeah. Well,
I'll close and I'll just keep my suburban stores.
I mean, I think to my point on the pharmaceutical sales, what developers 25 years ago told me was that those drugstores made all their money on the drive-through pharmacy. That's where the profit margin was on those stores, and why they always insisted on the drive-through lane. And I think what's happened is, so it's a combination of factors. They're making less money on the pharmaceutical because more people are doing mail order now for pharmaceuticals than going to the store. And they're getting hammered by theft for all the other goods.
The slippage is getting out of control.
So they're getting both at the same time, which they can't handle. So in markets where they're not getting the theft, those stores are not closing.
Right.
But in the urban markets, like in parts of town we're in, those stores are closing because they can't handle the double whammy.
Yeah. So keep it real. What you said was this is a win potentially because of the built environment in regard to the aesthetics are outdated, and we need to hold the aesthetic design of these retail outlets to a higher standard to be more friendly to the urban environment.
That's true.
Which I agree. Right. And I said, hey, I think my exact words were, that's a real yuppie elitist take.
I think that's right. I think those were your words.
I think those are my exact words. Yeah. Here's why I say that.
I would say that's rude.
Let's say the text through.
And again, I often do things for shock effect. Shows know me a long time. Right? We're friends, so it's all friendly. But what I mean by that is this. There are people in those communities, that was their only outlet for some of those sundries and critical household needs that they could walk to, get to easily, and to say, well, there's going to be that vacancy is now going to be filled by something that's more aesthetically pleasing, I think is somewhat short-sighted from the design lens we all love, because whether we like the aesthetics of it or not, it now creates a vacuum where those people, the people who are not stealing from the store, your grandma, the single mom, so on and so forth, the working class people, then you relied on that retail outlet as a service.
I think
it's all gone, and that's sad. Because we relaxed some of our standards from a public safety standpoint to allow some of these things to happen, or people are suffering enough that they feel like that is the resort that people are leaning into.
The opinion that I gave was not supposed to be taken in that way. This is what I was saying.
No, explain it. Yeah, it make sense.
This is what I was saying. It actually supports your argument. Irrelevant of socioeconomic status, irrelevant of the neighborhood you live in, you deserve beautiful things. These are inclusive things, not exclusive. So yes, that grandmother who's on a fixed income, that laborer who makes $50,000-$60,000 a year or less, that person who has a handicap, who relies on public transportation, deserves a beautiful pharmacy. That's my point. Mm-hmm. The point is not that CVS. Oh, sorry, I didn't.
Bleep cut that out.
SVC.
It's all right.
They who will not be named.
CVS, they're not listening.
Name
anyway. Yeah, I get your point.
Name your national or international drugstore company. The point is, we should demand beauty irrelevant of where they're located. And in this regard, they should be built to a walkable
standard,
walkable, street-facing, open windows, all the standards that I think we as urbanists expect and should expect, that we recognize that fit the type of built environment that we are attracted to. That should be built there, irrelevant of who's coming in. That was my point.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I've always regretted about Midwesterners is that we don't have high enough standards about the built environment. And it was always interesting to me for the years that I lived in the South. Say what you want to say about Southerners, good, bad, or indifferent. They give a damn about beauty and about how a place looks and feels.
And it shows.
And
Their
it
cities
shows.
are beautiful.
Yeah. And Midwesterners, we have a different mindset about a lot of things, which I'm a Midwesterner, and that's, you can't escape that. Like that's part of the personality. But one of the unfortunate things is we are too accepting of mediocrity in buildings, in the built environment generally. And have you ever seen one of former Mayor Joe Riley's speeches, the former mayor of Charleston, South Carolina? He was mayor of Charleston for almost like 40 years. Incredible guy. And I'll post a link in the show notes. He famously would give a speech related to beauty. So he was basically the mayor that helped resurrect Charleston from the dead. And he is incredibly passionate about beauty and what it means just for the average person. And he tells some stories when he talks about this that are unbelievable. And just like they will bring a tear to your eye because of his understanding of what it means for just a regular person to live in a place where you can experience beauty on a daily basis and how that enriches your life.
Everyone deserves it.
Right.
Yeah. I'll agree with that.
Yeah. And I do. So it's in a certain way, I can agree with both of you. Personally, I have always felt that's really, really important. I also agree you can't legislate it. Like you just can't. I mean, there are things you can do you can eliminate some of the worst mistakes through coding. But at the end of the day, whether or not you have beautiful buildings comes down to the developer and the architect. And you either have good developers who care about that and good architects who care, or you don't. And for somebody who is a bad architect, you can't make them produce a good building. And no design regulations have ever done that. But there are ways to prevent the worst things from happening. And unfortunately, in our city, we have allowed some of the worst form of development to happen. So whether that is the drugstores we talked about earlier in our part of town, whether it's the Family Dollar that's a Butler building on Prospect, because hey, it's just Prospect, who gives a crap?
Exactly.
Right? They should be happy to get a Family Dollar.
Yeah, it's bullshit.
Kevin,
I have a question for you. How does that happen? I have my own philosophy. I think we relax our standards when it suits us, kind of to your point. But how does that happen? Why do we allow a Family Dollar or a Dollar General, and if you're contacted, I guess we'll take some heat. But there's a point in time when those things probably served need, and maybe that's how it happened, and we allowed them to relax standards. Again, it's not about the business; it's about we're talking about the aesthetics.
Yeah,
like it's a metal-sided building, and they're on truths. I mean, like why?
Well, I mean, I think every. I think one of the unfortunate things about development is you get developers who are strictly looking at the bare bottom line from time to time. And there is a mindset that some developers have that you can't actually create value through doing something well, that there's only the market as it is today, and you have to save every penny to serve that market. You can't do something better. And I'm not saying that's always wrong. Sometimes that's true. And in our era, we have the ability to build buildings very cheaply because of modern construction methods. So Butler buildings, tilt-up construction, whatever that is.
Tilt-up would be better.
Tilt-up would be better in many cases. But we have the ability to throw up really cheap, ugly buildings that serve a function. Like one of the things that I've lamented my whole life is how bad church architecture has gotten.
Oh,
right?
wow. Yeah.
Like churches in every community for almost our entire history were the most noble buildings. And they were the most beautiful buildings. And then we hit a point starting
the centers of cities in most of the Latin world.
Yeah. And then we'd have a point starting like in the 70s where they've just become horrendously ugly. And now in like small town or suburb around the country, they're all metal buildings. And it's just like, you're like,
Yeah.
what the hell is this?
There's a place for metal buildings. I mean, let's
Yeah.
just be clear. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
attacking all metal building
Right.
construction. That is
Right.
not my point. My point is in an urban fabric, kind of like
Yeah.
we're frankly talking around. I think we all agree on the same thing. It's like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, let's have certain design standards that at least facades
Yeah.
should exist, no matter what the socioeconomics around you want to argue. It's like, hey, like we're going to have at least this design aesthetic. So like, hey, your facade has to look like such.
Yeah.
And especially, hopefully it's street facing, like, or street frontage,
Mhm.
That's right.
right? Zero lot line as much as possible.
Right.
We understand people still need cars and parking and all of that. Got to allow for some of that. But like, let's not just acquiesce to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all of it.
And we get a lot of that. And we, I think one of the things that happens in a lot of communities is you have a mindset of desperation. And when you have a mindset of desperation, it's hard to get anything good. You don't demand quality, or you just don't demand that people do better.
Right.
And that is that's a vicious circle, because then you don't get anything good. When something happens, it won't be good. And then that feeds into the cycle that you're never going to get anything good because you're not creating quality to begin with. And so I think that's one of the things that's always interested me when we talk about urban revitalization in really tough neighborhoods, which is how do you start to build a culture of quality where there's an expectation that whatever you're going to do well. Because then people are drawn to that and they want to be around it and they want to be a part of it.
Sounds like a great next show.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about that.
That's what it sounds
absolutely.
like.
Yeah. Yeah.
You do an amazing job, Kevin. Thank you for curating these conversations. Thank you for allowing me to come back. I appreciate it.
I'm glad we could work it in your
yeah.
schedule. You're a hard man to get.
That's not true. Anything for you.
Hardest working man in banking. He's like the James Brown and he's like the James Brown in lending.
Both of you guys are hard to get,
that's
and
high
to get both of you at the same time is really hard. So,
This is always fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll do it again. All right. Hour and 45 minutes. Not too bad. Not too bad. All right, fellas. Thanks a lot. Any final words?
Keep up the good fight.
Anything you want to promote real quick? Come to Vine Street Brewery
Yeah, and the Prospect.
and the Prospect.
And if you like ink, Kino G at 2000 Vine, then I'll have others as time goes on.
All right.
Well, yeah, like you say that, but like those tenants that you have there, they're so cool.
Amazing.
The Kino G, that tattoo is almost talking me into getting a tattoo once. So, I might be down there. We'll see.
She's amazing.
All right.
Get a full sleeve. As far as me, like, again, thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for doing the leadership work you do in the community. Thank you for the private work you do in the built environment. Show thank you for everything you do. You're a friend. You've been a client. I always appreciate getting together with you. You're one of the most fascinating people I know, and I just appreciate the opportunity to know you both. As far as things to promote, Landmark Bank, we are community lender here in the Midwest, here in Kansas City, Missouri. We just opened up a loan production office in Kansas City, Missouri. And so we're growing our commercial footprint in Kansas City, Missouri, and just stay tuned for things to come. We'll always be here to stand beside you and come alongside you in the entrepreneurial journey and help lead you and you lead us, and we'll get to really successful outcomes for our city, and that's what matters.
I know from experience, Jason will fight for you. He will fight for you. You want him on your side.
I appreciate that. I'm like a bull in a china cabinet sometimes, so I try to get some good advice from Kevin and Clink on how to
if
do
he
that
likes your
sometimes.
project. If he likes your
Fair
project.
enough.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, guys.
All right, guys. Thanks very much.
Yep.
Thanks, everybody, for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.